Hello, this is Saul Luckman. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Conversations on Saul Luckman Uncensored, sponsored by snooze2awaken.com, resources for lucidity. For more information about my work, including a lot of cutting-edge free content, check out crowrising.com. I'm also on Telegram, where I'm lighting it up at t.me/Saul Luckman. And as always, I'm absolutely crushing it on Substack at saulluckman.substack.com, where I've just released my new book, Musings from a Small Island. This self-illustrated memoir, packed with over 150 images over 238 pages, will have you alternately bursting with laughter and bursting at the seams with new perspectives on life, death, and the curiouser and curiouser cosmos we call home. For a limited time, you can laugh along with the complete text with a free 7-day trial, which will also give you access to a wealth of additional premium content, including my award-winning novels, Callie the Destroyer and Snooze, and my international best-selling book on sound healing, Potentiate Your DNA. If you're a researcher, author, influencer, or content creator interested in talking energy medicine, shamanism, simulation theory, and related topics with me on this show, by all means, drop me a line. I'm also open to coming on other podcasts as a guest to drill down into what's up in the simulacrum and how we can survive and thrive here. If you really appreciate what I'm doing here, I'd really appreciate your buying me a coffee, which I'll be sure to sip in your honor at buymeacoffee.com/Saul Luckman. And now for something completely different. Today, I'm very keen to explore, in his own words, the outer limits of mind, magic, and far-edge science with renowned author and all-round supercharged creative dude, Dr. Snake. Dr. Snake, whom I met via his Substack at drsnakenews.substack.com, is a renowned author, best known for his wacky gonzo journalism and the world's #1 best-selling book on voodoo, Dr. Snake's Voodoo Spellbook. You can also find him at drsnake.net, where he describes his approach of docology as self-help on steroids. If you're looking for conventional wisdom, you won't find it here. Instead, I offer a rebellious, unconventional take on personal growth and self-improvement. And I will say that I found the website very, very intriguing. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Dr. Snake. You're one truly fascinating fellow.
Yeah, well, supreme. Yeah, it was great. You made a comment on my Substack, and then off we went. So it's supreme.
So yeah, I mean, I would love to get around to that comment because it had to do with this idea of what's going on in the world relative to simulation theory and artificial intelligence. What is AI? Where is it? What's it doing? That kind of thing. But if you don't mind, let's get to that later on in this discussion. I thought, just as a way of contextualizing where you're coming from, when people hear the word voodoo, very often there's a negative attribution to it. However, in reading through your material, and I haven't read your book, so let me just provide full disclosure there, but you have a kind of, I want to say, kind of holistic approach to self-improvement that's mixed in with voodoo. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Well, actually, how it all began and the Doc Snake's Voodoo spell book. That you see, what happened was, because I was in bands, playing guitar, and all the rest of it, like when I was young in the 80s, and I still do. But I can't remember, but sometime in the 80s, I met this chap from Trinidad who was, older guy. And he happened to be, as you do, he happened to be a voodoo chap or root worker. And it was in London. So he kind of travelled the world. He's from Trinidad, travelled the world, merchant navy, lived quite a long time in the American South, and yeah, so his trade was that of a professional root worker, and he was doing it in London for the West Indian African communities, and he was
Mind
singer
if I
too.
interrupt you very briefly?
Sure.
Where was he living in the South? Do you know?
Oh, well, it was because I know Mississippi quite well. From what I remember, he kind of drifted because I hadn't been there at the time. And now I've got a wife who's from Mississippi or for a long time, And yeah, so Louisiana, Mississippi
Okay,
areas, as I
okay.
understand it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because I spent a lot of time in the low country of South Carolina, and there are people there who are called the Gullah people, and there are
I know.
many types of uh, aspects to that culture that have some resonance with voodoo. So I just wondered if there was any connection there.
Oh, well, he couldn't go there because, well, actually, he was probably dead by then, but there was a Dr. Buzzard. So Earl Marlowe was his name. Yeah, it was kind of a joke. He couldn't really have gone there because Dr. Buzzard was there and he'd kill you. So,
Right, okay.
but he wasn't, I think he was probably dead actually, but when Earl, I can't remember, but yeah. So my time with Earl in London, we were doing music. He was a good singer, world music, from blues, calypso, you name it. He just got me playing it, and luckily I could play most things. And so we did loads of gigs originally around London, but he got me kind of well, it sounds a bit trite, but as his apprentice, really. I was just mucking about with him, but yeah. So I was joining him, and then by I can't remember 93 maybe when he died. I just kind of carried on because I couldn't stop because the his clientele, if you like, Africans, West Indians. So yeah, we need we need you. And so yeah, so it kind of literally carried on like that. So the book just chronicled it. It wasn't your normal kind of, well, as you I think would guess, it wasn't your normal kind of spell book or how-to book. It was really like the equivalent of Fear and Loathing, but in that Hunter Thompson's Fear and Loathing, and so there's all the good stuff that people might want, but it was quite a wild ride. So that's where all that came from.
So you would say that it has a strong and compelling narrative focus in addition to having a lot of useful data.
Yeah, that you've said it absolutely spot on. Yes.
That's good. That's great. That makes for a really nice book. So I'm gonna have to check this out. Now we're talking about you've got the two books that I was seeing. One was the one was the um I'm looking for it's the Snake's Voodoo spell book, and then there was a second book that came up on Amazon. I think it was no, I think there's two different versions of the book that I'm seeing. That's what's
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah, the original was really quite ornate, with great illustrations. So it was quite costly, the production, and it came out via St. Martin's Press. But when we thought, or I thought, need to get Voodoo Spellbook 2.0 out, my pal Joe Gregory, who's publisher, yeah, we sort of did it. So it's not as ornate, but it's still pretty good, and it's a lot longer. There was a lot to add to it. Yeah, a lot of stories.
So the black one or the red one came out with from St. Martin's Press, which is a very good press.
Oh, the original was the red,
The
and
red,
the
yeah, that's
black
the one I'm
one.
looking at. Yeah, so it says,
Yeah, that's the
yeah,
kind of collectors
it's got a
almost.
nice
Yeah.
description there. Voodoo in its many guises has millions of adherents, yet it remains shrouded in secrecy and sometimes fear. With the Voodoo
Mm,
spellbook, Dr. Snake, a renowned practitioner of voodoo, guides the reader safely through this shadowy world. Voodoo does not shy away
mm.
from human passions, but treats them honestly and with respect. Voodoo teaches the acolyte how to fulfill desires, mete out revenge, and gain personal power. With Dr. Snake's
Mm.
simple spells, the reader will learn how to gain love and sex, money and power, and health and well-being. And packaged with each kit is a lucky mojo doll, which can be used as a voodoo doll or as a mojo charm. So how would you distinguish between voodoo doll versus mojo charm? Is that kind of negatives versus positive, or is that a simplification?
uh, Quite honestly, it's kind of complexity. Some people would say, the dolls should be used for like, well, killing people, you know, but for like breaking up couples, and all that. But actually, they're really like the old witchcraft of well, which really came out of England, the poppet doll. It's the same sort of thing, so it could be used for whatever you like. These things blur, mojo charms, gree, they all blur, but some people will say strictly should be this, and but honestly, if you look through, all the annals of it going back to 1920s and before, some of the really old books, you realize they're just, improvising, really. Yeah.
So you're seeing that as definitely a cross-cultural phenomenon. I'm seeing that as well. Are there other places besides Europe and in some of the African countries where you see such dolls? I mean, would we see anything like that in Asia, for example, or in South America?
South America, definitely, yeah, definitely. So yeah, with England or Britain, there was wax and dolls, poppet dolls. It was the kind of witchcraft of the time. So certainly South America, because the sort of African, how do you say it, diaspora, went over there. So these sort of practices, but in the end, they're very much the same. Because if you care to go back to Anglo-Saxon Britain, or sorry, England, Angle land, Angles, Saxons. The practices are quite similar, or the Norse, Northern Europe, Norway, Sweden, and all that. The practices, they wouldn't have been surprised, because obviously Africans and English didn't really meet, because it was too, with the pagan Anglo-Saxon times. Had they done so, they might have seen a wild Viking with his sword, and they'd have thought, well, fair enough, we're kind of the same, we look different. And I think they would most definitely have found, once they've got some kind of language going and able to communicate, they just said, yeah, oh, you've got Thor. This Thor is, and I can't remember, but they'd have seen similarities, and the practices would have been trance, deep trance in, say, Viking, or rather Norse and Anglo-Saxon. They did trance stuff, very deep trance. It was called Sadir. It's usually women that did it. And and so you got similar practices. You could even call it possession trance, which is quite common in Voodoo, Santeria, all the same sort of thing. They'd have known. They'd have said, "Oh yeah, right, we can do that too, and let's join in." So it'd probably been quite cool.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in Brazil and in Rio, and there's a lot of this type of thing that goes on with like candomblé culture and
Mm,
just a lot of spell casting and magic and that sort of thing. It's very well established there, and a lot of the people there, came from Africa and some of the very same cultures we're talking about. So, and then it
mm,
went through the kind of, Afro-Brazilian lens and became something a little different with time, but it's still very
mm,
much there. I even have a scene in this novel that I'm bringing out later this year called Beginner's Luke,
mm,
where the eponymous hero is healed by a practitioner of candomblé who basically channels the god Ormolu, god of plague and
mm.
disease, to come in and dispel this illness that he's contracted.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. And when you actually think about it, that let's say to the average person in corporate management, you know, um, that might seem, God, that's scary, that's crazy. And I would just say, well, I would say, I'm not saying it works all the time, healing and all that. But probably a lot better than our big friends at Big Pharma. Um, and so yeah, I'd say it works. And you could say people are being hurled into it's really this reality, but I'm going to say other reality. So it's almost like a DMT, meet the machine elves of hyperspace kind of thing, and boom. So maybe it blasts off deep mind placebo.
Right, right. I mean, at some point in time, if you see the world as simply an energetic construct based in consciousness, is
Mm.
there anything except placebo and nocebo? The question, it does at least deserves
yeah,
asking because, what are we doing? I mean, if this is all kind of a mind construct, I mean, is there anything outside of the mind construct? I mean, I don't know. I tend to think no. I don't, what do you think?
I agree with you. I mean, because, when I just spoke, I suppose I was, in a sense, still in the material, if you like. But so maybe I could have put it better to say, it's like a DMT blast, machine elves of hyperspace, because it somehow says, hey, none of this is kind of solid reality. So, you can become well because it's a mind construct that you're sick, you know, uh, something like that. Anyway, yeah. So, I mean, I agree with what you've just said, but I may have not been terribly eloquent on that. But it somehow throws you into other reality, which is really this reality, or it's many realities, and blows your mind enough to make it go away and become a whole energetic being again, perhaps.
Yeah, so talk a little bit more about the healing aspect of the work that you're doing and teaching people. It's I'm getting kind of the mental framework here. Could you just go a little deeper into sort of the mechanics of it or the technique of it? What are people actually doing? Are they doing this as as self-directed work, or do they require somebody to do it for them?
Yeah, I mean, mostly do it for them. Um, but I try to encourage, the self help aspect, that you can do it too. But I think the sort of demographic that I am in, I mean, I think the back of that original spell book kind of probably told you to. It's compared to many paths, it's very, very earthy. It's people, basically money. I need money. I need gambling luck. I
Mm.
need um love or heal a relationship, bring someone back. But um you see where the healing comes in. So bear in mind the earthiness. Um the healing comes in like I've been hexed or I've got entities going on, so someone will, many will say, they wake up in the night and there's some creature going on with them, and some black, dark, you know, thing, so I take many different approaches to that because clearly, because I talk to people, and I think, well, I obviously say, well, if you've been involved with the medical people, doctors, and that, and usually, obviously, they don't want to say that stuff to them. But in Britain in the 90s, general practitioners, doctors, actually, they had the budget to send people who had these, what they think of as very unusual and wouldn't know what the hell to do with it. They were able to send them to traditional healers, but not now because as the economies are all shot. But so what I do is I'll so they tell me about, it's kind of, they might, it's kind of like the demonic thing, but they might not be into that. But it's an entity apparently, and I think the other week I sort of said, okay, so if you talk to it, you know, and So ask it what it wants. So I'm quite like that. I mean, and it's quite humor. Usually people laugh, it really lightens it up because, I more or less say to them, yeah, say, what do you want, mate? In a London accent, and, makes people laugh. So that's really good because the laughter, and then it breaks because you have to enter their belief system, you know, because I've tried other approaches and they don't work. So you've got to enter the belief system and you're going to play, for want of a better word, play with it. I mean, people have serious problems with these, energy being drained, no, everything goes wrong, well, because their state of mind, so really it's almost like you're playing with it and to get them to get that spark, and you're really trying to get it so some part of them, which you could call the subconscious, deep mind, whatever you want to say, that comes into play, and then they'll say things like, God, how did you do that, Dot Snake? It's like a weight been lifted off my shoulders. And I always say, well, it wasn't me that did it, you did.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah,
So, you would have
yeah.
some people, especially from more mainstream areas of understanding, more left brain or quote unquote scientific people who would
Mm,
say this is all in people's heads, right? And
mm,
and then you would have people who, come from maybe more right brain perspectives, people who can maybe see or feel energy, or maybe who are on a
mm.
shamanic path who would say, no, this is actually real phenomena here. How would you describe what's going on with folks with when they are reporting uh, these kinds of energy drainage situations, or entities, or mental parasites, or possession? There's all kinds of different ways of
Mm,
describing what's going on here.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Yeah, how would what do I? This problem with me is, and as you and I get to know each other, I I will go into whatever paradigm. So just right now, I'll just go into, yeah, you could have the all in the mind, as in we create our own realities. You could have that, but then you could temper that with the far edge of plasma physics, where plasma essentially is, like comets are made of it, all that. But most of the universe, if there's one universe, multiverse, whatever. But so let's say universe. So uh, over 99% of it is plasma, and we're quite unique, because we are, you know, made of atomic, we're kind of more material, shall we say. And this plasma is in us and it's in the world too. And there's two massive plasma clouds. They're as big as two Earths put together between us and the moon. And some of the more far edge scientists that don't mind speaking say, yeah, they're intelligent and very ancient. And so they're thinking about all the what's been called paranormal phenomena, from UFOs, you name it, odd phenomena. And even the fairy people, perhaps, might be plasma beings. So entities might. This is what some of the far edge scientists say. Could well be, intelligent, very different to us and very ancient. So their agendas are different, but these entities could be plasma beings. So that's kind of just one paradigm, but I do tend to go into far too many paradigms,
Right. One of the things
actually.
that well, recently, that has occurred to me in relation to this discussion is that, you're looking at potentially this idea that you get in shamanism of inorganic beings.
Brilliant, brilliant. Yes.
So, like, a lot of the Castaneda Toltec shamanism is based on this idea that we have a kind of we are one intelligent species in this realm, and there's another intelligent species which, uh, for lack of a better term, has been called energetic or inorganic beings. And we often
Mm,
encounter them when we go into sleep states and that sort of thing. And yes, you can be trapped, and you can be, in essence, taken over, or maybe even possessed would be a word, by these forces. And there are
mm.
definitely techniques for dealing with them, and that sort of thing, that are spread out throughout this body of information. Does that ring a bell for you at all?
Oh, most definitely. Because Castaneda was his books are absolutely brilliant. I first came across him when I was quite young, just in a charity shop with they had books in, and I thought, what's that, and I was amazed by them, and with him. One thing I will say about Castaneda, the inorganic beings, I thought is a great term. I think it fits the plasma beings or entities quite well. So I think that's really good. But with what got me most with Carlos was I thought, and do correct me if you think I'm absolutely wrong, I thought a lot of Carlos Castaneda's stuff, at least some of it, is Gurdjieff, very much of the Gurdjieff tradition, stopping internal dialogue. And that was the great thing that Castaneda said, or Don Juan, stop internal dialogue. And then there was I think you pronounce it Narwhal. It's like Nargua,
Yes,
but it's
yes,
Narwhal, I think.
yes, yes.
Yeah. And so that I would see as the visionary, what you were saying about when you're asleep or lucid dreaming or just going into that state, which science would call close your eyes and you can see stuff, loads of sparkling things when you shut your eyes, and science tends to call that entoptic vision. And so this is what I do a lot. So basically, just for myself, psychonaut stuff, and so you just with your eyes shut, you watch the sparkling, and you might get slightly drowsy, and then they that takes on form, and you can find yourself somewhere else. Or it might be just going down a lane, but you're flying, so it's a bit like driving a car, but you're actually flying. It could be anything. And that is or at least in my opinion, it's the entry point to that other realm.
Very good. Yes, you're spot on with that. In my experience in doing lucid dreaming, or in doing the different dreaming gates that Castaneda talks about, you start out
Mm, mm,
just by basically having either a really vivid dream or becoming aware that you're in a dream. And
mm.
then you get into the second gate when you wake up in another dream.
Yes.
And when you do that,
Yeah.
which is kind of like you're going down the lane or you're getting the sparkly thing or whatever, that's when you get access to the inorganic beings realm.
Mm,
And you can have
mm.
encounters with them. You can be taken to where they exist or whatever, and you can have, conversations and receive information and
Oh
share
yeah.
all of that
Yeah.
there.
Mm. Well, I remember. I think it maybe sometime last year, and going, basically lucid dreaming, and it was quite amazing, really. It's so where did I end up? To me, it was perhaps could easily be an American older kind of town, or Britain oldest town, and the building, but there was a river there and a kind of boathouse, and just lower down, I seemed to be definitely, you wouldn't have known it was there from the street. So, and what was that? So there was a fire burning. It was quite wild. It was quite anarchic, and there were people there, and they were kind of, you might say, vagabonds, but good-hearted, if you like. And it was them that I was talking with. So I was almost with an out. I'm not going to say outlaw band, but kind of. They were definitely aside from society. They were the fringe dwellers that aren't quite part of. Well, they're certainly not part of our society, but yeah. And so I was communing with them. I just think remember the fire burning because it reminded me of years ago, like raves and like all that kind of thing, and there'd be fires burning and the rave, acid house going, and it was like wild,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
kind of like that. And yeah, Yeah.
But this was a lucid dream that you had that might have been in association with inorganic beings.
Well, I'm going to say it could well have been because it was one of those I'm going, it's kind of profound, strong dream where it kept with you for a couple of days. That you could feel it in my body almost. You somehow learned something, and I can't put that into left brain language. But yeah. So it's certainly possible. I think so. Yeah, yeah.
I mean the way you describe that kind of body gnosis that you could take from that encounter does
Mm,
absolutely ring a bell. It's even I think it would ring a bell for readers of Castaneda.
mm,
Also, I just wanted to go back to an earlier point you made. You talked about Gurdjieff and the idea of the inner
mm,
silence, which is a really, really big part of the Toltec path. I would say that
mm,
that did not come from Gurdjieff. That came from, if we're to believe Castaneda and the other writers on this subject, as well as Don Juan, who's
mm,
providing a lot of the narrative basis for these books. The tradition they're tapping into is thousands of years old, and the
mm,
and it went into a third cycle. It kind of got out of a sort of a dark, almost voodoo-like period, if you will, in the second
mm,
cycle, and it emerged from that on the other side of the Spanish conquest in the 1700s. And that's when the people who had bits and pieces of the old knowledge, the old magic, they
mm,
realized that it didn't work out too well for those people. They got slaughtered, they got enslaved, decimated, destroyed.
mm,
And so they began asking, why? And one of the reasons was that the people believed that because they had made friends, that, as they thought, with the inorganic beings, and they called them allies
mm.
for this reason, they
Oh
thought
yeah. Mm,
powerful, and that these beings would help them resist whatever.
mm.
You know,
Yeah.
it's kind of like everybody thinks they're tough until they get hit in the mouth, like Mike Tyson, And so what happened was they got invaded and destroyed, and they weren't nearly as powerful as they thought they were. And
Mm,
the new generation of seers, starting in the 1700s, began looking at what went wrong and where do we go from here? And they got deeper and deeper into the abstract side of things where they were pursuing the concept of total freedom and how to transmute the body itself into energy.
mm,
And that's where people are now on the Toltec path is they're pursuing that way of becoming whole and one with all that is.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I fully agree with that. And someone who came from that I knew that came from, um, you might know. What is the book? There's a chap called Tomas, Tomas, Thomas Tomas, and called Creative Victory, and I had some involvement with him or them rather that came after him. So that they said exactly what you said, and I suppose if we go back to Gurdjieff, then we know that he may have got things from a Sufi monastery. So the Sufi thing is quite similar and things. But yeah. So I agree. It's far, far more ancient, or Patanjali in Indus Valley, Indian subcontinent. So yeah, I absolutely agree. It goes
Or
back
even
a
Buddhist
long way.
meditation with your white wall and your vase as your props, right? And you're kind of going back and forth between
Mm,
those two phenomena until you enter a kind of inner silence.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. As you say, you can, if you care to look, and I can't remember, but with the Indian subcontinent traditions, some of the texts, which I can't remember which ones offhand, but yeah. So this is perhaps odd. They would their point of focus to get to the silence was the internal ringing sound, which people call tinnitus or tinnitus, depending
Oh
how
my
you
goodness.
first
So they were
pronounce it.
cultivating this ringing in the ears.
They really were. Oh yeah, so this is quite a big one. I've said this for so many years. It's kind of crazy. I've said, do you know, to people that in Indian subcontinent, the old texts, it most definitely. I know they were referring to that because a guru, well, he was a child guru, and now he's an adult, and that came. He was well known in America, I believe, and but came to Britain first to the Glastonbury then free festival, big music festival, and he was kind of a boy or a teenager. And I got to, just by chance, maybe in the 80s, I got to know people who were in his divine light movement, it was called. And you could see it as cultish. Well, you can see everything from, Pentecostal church to, Indian
Sure,
gurus as
sure.
cultish, can't you know? But, and they said, oh, it's secret what we do. And I soon started to figure it out, and then this one chap who really liked to drink, and, probably not good for him, but he's a real character. And then he just told me, and basically, the divine light movement, one of their key meditation practices, the point of what I would call the point of focus, was the internal ringing sound, which people call tinnitus. And some people have brain operations to try to stop it. So my contention is why. So why is it that a few 100,000 people meditate on it, and maybe many more hundreds of thousands going back to Indian subcontinent meditate on it? But I would just add that ringing sound is very, for want of a better term, at least for me, linked to you know out of body or astral project kind of thing, which sort of lucid dreaming, all merged together. That it's a key aspect, and I wondered if perhaps the internal ringing sound is, just speculating, is the sound of, let's say, either your nervous system working like an engine in a car making rumbling noise, or it's the sound of your energetic system. I don't know.
That's absolutely fascinating. I mean, just in my own experience, when I've had little
Mm,
moments of that, that have come and gone,
mm,
often it's associated with some kind of intuitive message or a synchronicity. Like, for
mm,
example, I might get this little, just a second of ringing, and I'll look at the clock, and it'll be 4:44 or 1:11 or 11:11 or something
mm.
like that.
Right, yeah.
So that's kind
Mm,
of interesting. And then there's also some information that comes out of the Toltec work that
mm.
ringing or buzzing or a kind of
Yeah.
effervescence is associated with
Mm.
lucid dreaming. Absolutely.
Oh, that's yeah. Now I recall that. So yeah, it's part of the mysteries really. But but I will just drop in that. This was so long. I think it might even have been late 90s. Just by a circuitous route, I got talking to a lady, middle aged, from the south of France, I think it was, and got onto tinnitus. Said, "Oh God, I've been just tormented by it for so many years, and in the end, I had a brain operation, but it didn't work." And I told her all this about the Indian subcontinent, the divine light movement, meditating on it. I've also found reference to shamans in South America that before their visionary journeys, the ringing would get loud. And so I just basically told her all this, but in some depth. And then she got back to me maybe days or a week later and said, "You know what? I'm completely cured after what you said. I followed it up, and God, yeah,
That's
it's
great.
not a condition. It's not a condition." I said, "No, it's the well, it's almost like it's not a psyop, but it's almost like everything that's gone on in the last 3 years, belief and the power of it and, reality, and in her case, it was just gone like that. And
That is,
yeah, I mean, I wasn't trying.
I love
Mm,
that. That's a wonderful story. Yeah. So you were giving her context for a different context, and she kind of did the rest, right?
mm. Oh, definitely. Yeah, you're absolutely excellent way of putting it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she wasn't like coming to me. I just came across her, so it was, chatting, and so it was a chance encounter that allowed her to change the context. Yeah, yeah.
Now, this whole discussion around silence and the inner silence, or the stopping the dialogue, as it's sometimes talked about, stopping the internal dialogue.
Mm,
This is a big thing because even in on your website, I noticed you mentioned this as a way of ridding yourself of attachments if you wanted to go the self-healing route. Is
mm.
did I am I remembering that correctly?
Well, the big, yeah, I think I'm not necessarily saying people even want to hear it that much, but so it's very much genuine on my part to always be pushing, the idea of stopping the internal dialogue, having the ability to do that, to be aware, to allow the input of your senses. So you're walking down the street, and just, you don't really have to try to stop the internal dialogue if you sort of make sure you see just the ordinary things, like there's a tree, you see the leaves, the colors, and then the sound. You hear the sound of maybe a bird singing, car going past, people talking, and you go into your body. Stop internal dialogue. And so, one of the big things on a more basic level that I'll say to people is, look, so if you do that, you would basically have a self observer that I call a higher I, the letter I, and when you've got that, then you'll be aware of emotions that are going on which don't serve you. You'll feel it's kinesthetic, in the body. You'll feel given emotions rising, which might be anger, jealousy, a bit put out by someone. And if you let your internal dialogue start up, it will say, yeah, that they were totally out of order, weren't they? You should give them a good bloody kicking, and your emotions will then start off and then turn into feedback loop. So, for me, on a basic level, it's trying to teach people, look, you could be more in self-control, and up to a given point, master of your own, or mistress as well, of your own destiny. You can't control anything. I mean, obviously, I might get into the Tao thing of going with the flow and all of that, but essentially, you're going to be much more serene in life. So, yeah, that's a really big thing with me. Yeah.
So, are there other techniques besides what you just described that you recommend or that you teach or that you know about for helping stop the inner dialogue? For example, in Toltec shamanism, there's something called the right way to walk, where you can just be walking along, and what you're wanting to do is non-pattern how you're taking in the world. So you basically put your hands in a different position where you curl your fingers up, and that allows you to not be quite so odd to people that you might be passing by. And then you look at the horizon. You wouldn't want to do this in a high traffic area, obviously, but you look
No.
at the horizon and you gently defocus your eyes and allow them to even cross slightly so that it
Mm,
expands your horizontal vision quite tremendously, actually. It gives you kind of a
mm.
double picture of the world. It's a kind of overload of the world, and it helps shut out the internal dialogue. And sometimes it doesn't even happen when you're walking, it happens later.
Mm,
You'll do that for a while. You'll go for a walk for an hour, and then you've had
mm.
all kinds of thoughts. And you get home and you're, making supper, and you realize you haven't had a thought in 10 minutes.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's good. I mean, yeah, I mean, going back years, yeah, when I was young, yeah, so I would be using techniques. I mean, now, I mean, maybe the weekend, I tend to stop off actually near this Ministry of Defence land. There's a place called Thetford Forest, and so there's an open bit. It's really quite good. Um, and I just, just off the road, park up, and yeah, and so I was sitting there in the car really, and the sun was shining. It's quite a few clouds, and so I just focused on this given cloud. So it's similar to what you do, and I was really just doing it for the sake of it, really. But then your vision, yeah, your eyes slightly, as you say, almost cross-eyed, and the whole thing then took on, the cloud, the trees around, a vividness, and almost like had like almost like golden halos around the trees, and certainly the cloud, different colors going on around it and things. So yeah, you just can just fall into that mode. And if there is any dialogue going on, I would say it's highly right brain. So it's visionary,
Yeah.
maybe the odd few words come through. Yeah, yeah. So there really are many. I think the more you do it, you tend to just improvise and just go into the silence as and when. Yeah, yeah.
I'm glad you said that because really there's a proliferation of techniques and
There's too many.
they basically have what
Mm,
they have in common is that they shift you into a non-ordinary perception. You could take a pile of leaves, for
mm,
example, and you could just redistribute the leaves, and then you could look at the leaves, for example, in the pile, and then you could mess up the
mm,
pile so that it changes the configuration, and then instead of looking at the leaves, stare at the shadows, at the holes where there are no leaves.
mm,
And it completely begins to shift you into that silent, silent, um, well, more of a silent state. You might have visionary thoughts like what you're talking about, but it's a very different
mm.
type of consciousness.
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. The space between things almost. Yeah, yeah. That's right. I think you put it really well about, you basically simple thing, like instead of looking at leaves, look at spaces or the shadows between them, and you're in non-ordinary reality right away. You've shaken things up. So that's a really good way of putting it, I think. Yeah. And it's remembering, because the way of the world, especially nowadays, is like very narrow tunnel vision of left brain reality. I contend, and so we're all impacted by that. So a lot of the time, it's just remembering. You can have a little bit of non-ordinary reality, more or less when you choose. If you don't have to be working at something, and so it's just remembering all those things. And I think the one you said is really good, like all looking at trees and look past the branches and twigs and leaves. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, that's good stuff. That's really good stuff. Another thing that you begin to feel when you go into the state is that we are in something like a simulation. That there's just
Mm.
that something there's we are in some context that is being created energetically or mentally, and because it becomes malleable, everything becomes so malleable and strange, and you realize it's all based in basically perception, how you're perceiving it, what your emotional state is, what your thought process is. I mean, obviously the shamans would say it depends on where your assemblage point is, and how you're focusing
Mm.
your reality, and that's one way of looking at it. But in a broader sense, we are sort of dreaming or thinking this world into being. I keep saying over and over again on this channel, that the the way out is in, that the way we change the world is by really changing ourselves. Heal thyself, heal the world, and it is all
Mm.
a product of perception and mindset. What are your thoughts on that subject?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I, you know, wholly agree. But yes, I absolutely agree with that. But talking of simulation, that's a curious one, isn't it? So I got into that when one of the videos, because I really quite enjoy just rambling on, in videos. Yeah, go for a walk and ramble on. But um, yeah, so just interests me. The simulation theory, is like because that would be more mechanistic and would contend that it's basically code, every and rendered reality. But obviously, maybe you and I would consider that, pardon me, that we, as you said, our mindsets change within and you change without. And, perhaps on a grand, for example, on a grander scale, so we're in this kind of very left, more left brain than humanity has ever been at the moment. And yet, on the fringes, I contend that you've got people. maybe there's a few 100,000 that talk about the Empire of Tartaria, and which, may have ended in Victorian times or a bit later, or was destroyed, and that a lot of the old buildings have been destroyed, but you can still see it in the grandiose, like St. Paul's Cathedral, the Taj Mahal. These were Tartarian.
Hey, Dr. Snake, do you
And
know who my last interviewee was?
Jason, would that be?
No, it was Martin Liedke.
Oh, yes, from Wales. Wales. Yes,
He's up
yes.
in
I
Cardiff,
don't know him
yes. And so
personally.
he's flat Earth
He's,
British, and he basically
yeah.
pioneered a lot of this Tartarian stuff.
Oh, he did. Yeah, yeah. I don't know him personally, but I've certainly, watched. I've read some of his book. I haven't quite finished it. It's still on the go. But yeah. So, but
Great
anyway, on the
guy,
time.
and he would probably connect with a lot of this conversation. He was sharing some of his experience of sleep paralysis as a child, and some
Oh,
very
was he?
weird things that happened that, who knows exactly what was going on. And then he went to
Mm.
the hospital, and they took like strange fibers and a metal object he took a metal object out of his body. I mean, all kinds of really,
Oh,
really strange things.
oh, that you did a. Yeah, yeah. I will listen to that. Yeah, yeah, because he's yeah, yeah. I think he's excellent. And but yeah.
I'm
So
sorry for
you know about
interrupting.
Tata. That's fine. No, I mean, about the whole Tartaria thing, which, there was a Russian guy in 2002, kind of revisionist history as well. But where we talked about mindset and the, change within and without. So there's probably a few 100,000 people very keen on the idea of the Empire of Tartaria. And let's just say it wasn't actually historically correct. There was a Tartary, and let's just say, like the academics say, that really it was just a territory and not really many
Right,
people lived
right.
there. It's kind of a fantasy. And so if we go with that, the mainstream, what the academics say, it's good. They kind of say it's good. People are getting into old architecture, that's good. But
Oh, right.
let's say, it's not, you know, whatever we might mean by factually. Let's just say that they're right. Then could it be argued that a few people, including Martin and the Russian guy and all that, slowly set this off, and then more and more people picked it up. So we must have quite a few 100,000 into it now. Could it be that because, this shared idea of a glorious past, which is really good, is recreating or bringing to life a past that didn't actually exist?
I absolutely feel that way. I mean, even in the shamanism, I was quoting during that interview with Martin. I was quoting from Ken Eaglefeather's On the Toltec Path.
Mm,
Really good book, an excellent book. He was a
mm,
student
mm,
of Don Juan. One of the few
mm,
students that we know about. He actually met him in person, spent time with him, and was an apprentice of Don Juan. And
mm,
he writes about how the great storytellers are always aware that on some level their story somewhere somehow that story is true.
mm,
And when you get enough people focusing on a story, you end up splintering off into something like an alternative reality.
mm. Oh yes, yeah, I agree, and so that's what personally I probably go with that paradigm that in fact Tartaria, the past, is being created,
Well,
and
I mean,
how will it affect our future?
retrocausality. I mean, just think about all that we're seeing.
Mm,
This the idea of science, of factuality is so problematic when you get into this kind of discussion. I have an article on my Substack called "Is the scientific method broken, or did it never exist in the first place?"
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, another contention that one could have is, science as scientism, which is essentially another faith system, but one that has rationality as its god, and so in a sense, we lost our religion, a lot in the world, but we haven't lost our religiosity, and science sort of has
That's a
become,
great quote. That's a great quote. We've lost
yeah,
our
we lost our
religion, but we
religion.
haven't lost our religiosity.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Well, pardon me. Yeah, it always struck me. Yeah, yeah, that I thought, yeah, I mean, I kind of like Richard Dawkins, the arch atheist, because he's flight sort of chap, really. But he is kind of dogmatic. It's like I kind of think, Richard, you're still doing the religion. I know you hate, but it's kind of like, yeah, you still got the religiosity there.
I thought the
Yeah.
exact same thing. Absolutely.
Mm, mm, yeah. So it's curious, but yeah. So I think so. It gives you, because again, it's certainty, isn't it? That science brings, and I know the very best quantum physicists aren't like that at all, but in Victorian times, science had solved everything. The physicists were saying, well, that's it, pack up, nothing more to do. We got it sorted out. And one of the chaps, I can't remember his name, he was like the head of the patent office in London, packed in his job. And they said, why have you packed it in? And he said, well, there's nothing more to invent. It's all done, nothing more for me to do. And, that was really
Amazing.
quite common.
Amazing.
Mm. And if that's not religion, what is?
Yeah, when these things freeze into like a new dogma, when you don't
Mm,
even see it coming, and suddenly, there it congeals, and oh my God, it's just another dogma. I think the problem is that we have a tendency as people, we want to know things, and as soon as you want to know something, then you
mm,
begin to set up inventories like that. You
mm,
have to create inventories to know what applies to that thing that you're knowing. And then you're
mm,
no longer the internal dialogue. You're no longer creating with spirit. You're creating with your mind, and you're using your
mm,
talk to project that world, and then it's going to mirror back to you what you're putting into it. Jason Bashir and I know you're familiar with him. He would say, the
mm,
simulacrum is going to feed back to you what you're feeding into it. And then this process then can ossify into any number of dogmas, be they religious or scientific, and then you're stuck again.
mm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely spot on. Yeah, 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 because I think Jason is absolutely excellent. And Jason Bashir, and what I like about him is, yeah, our world now, 2023, he's like the worst possible person that but he's really needed. When I say, I'm jokingly saying he's the worst possible person because, he's not an academic. He hasn't, he's basically in a Texas prison for ages. I know it was just the way it went from being a teenager and all that, but he's stuck in the prison.
Right.
The old antiquarian books happen to be in there, and he thinks, hang on, this seems consistent. What's going on? They're saying things that I wasn't taught in school. And so what I mean by he's the worst possible person, because he's important what he's coming out with. And I think people like him are going to be our future in many ways, because in like 90, let's say 80s, 90s, and well before that, you go to university, get your PhDs and whatnot, and it's the people that will be listened to. And I'm not saying they're 1,000% right. It'd be people like Jason Bashir, David Icke. It doesn't matter whether you kind of like these people or agree with them, but they're bringing something far more important to the world, than any of the others can do now. So, yeah, sure, there's some quantum physicists and plasma physicists, all of that are open-minded, but it's almost the fringe dwellers are coming out now, and they're going to be important, is my feeling.
Right. And there's a kind of what you're describing as a sort of reversal. Obviously
Mm,
riding the wings of social media and the new the new information economy where people can now find these people and they can create all of these
Mm,
audiences. And I know that there's censorship and there are lots of plans in place to try to shut that down. And maybe we'll see some kind of
mm,
internet crash or a bunch of snafus, whatever. But as
mm,
they stand at this moment, people are finding their audiences.
mm. Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. And it will continue no matter what is done by, let's just call them ruling overlords or what is put into action. They'll keep going because, when you think about it back, in the 1980s, 90s, before the internet, there was, I believe it was published in Australia, a magazine called Nexus.
Oh, it's still being
And
published.
that was, it's still around. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
they
Um,
reviewed my first book back in the 90s. No, the
oh,
early
really?
2000s. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Duncan Rose
That's
was the editor.
mm, yes, that's right. Yeah, and really, when you think about it, Nexus magazine, I'd see it in London, on the newsstand, and think, oh wow, latest one, grab it, and that before the internet, and that was our internet.
Absolutely. I mean, everybody that it would now be considered truthers or conspiracy theorists, they would have been the types gravitating to Nexus. Also, Atlantis
Mm.
Rising. I had
Oh
some
yeah,
articles published
yeah,
in Atlantis Rising back in the day. That's another really big one that was a hub for so many years.
yeah,
Very thankful to those
yeah.
guys, wonderful, wonderful pioneers for the movement. Sort of, I often have
Mm,
the feeling that we're standing on the shoulders of giants in so many ways. And that's a huge message
mm,
that Jason brings forward is that there are so many, like Fort's work or Gurdjieff or all of these amazing
mm,
philosophers and scientists, explorers, researchers, Thor Heyerdahl. I mean, my goodness, these people, were such
mm,
giants. But even more recently, like we were talking about, you had the beginnings of this alternative media, but even before we really got onto the internet.
mm. Yeah, definitely, definitely, and obviously found Nexus magazine and me in London. And, it's funny, I mean, because the name, if I try and picture myself, young chap, I doing why the hell did I pick it? I expect there was some of the headlines on the front cover, but we gravitated to that, and lots of people did, and it was a big thing. So, and I think now, absolutely. I mean, what I really kind of would like to see, we have not got this now because we really are in this kind of stayed locked down society, if you like, left brain, control freaks, if you like, in the tunnel vision. And what I'd love to see is that at some point this kind of breaks out and we get what I remember in the 90s where I mentioned like the acid house, the raves here they call it was tended to be called the second summer of love or something like that. And there was great optimism still then in the 90s. It was and humor as well. And for example, so I'm in London, pal of mine up further up North London, comes down and says, "Oh, let's go to the West Country where like Stonehenge is, Avebury Circle." And it was summer, so we were going hunting crop circles, and things like that. And we weren't the only ones. You'd see loads of people there that were kind of ravey acid house type people, and but there was a joy, so what I yearn for is for us to find the joy again, but we got a lot of work to do yet, so we get that, kind of that one day in a year, 2 years, I mean however long, that we get an actual new summer of love, that people open up. And it's like the machine elves of hyperspace or in organic beings, whatever. We're going into that, and suddenly we're free, and the controllers, if you like, really can't control anymore. So that's kind of my vision or hope for the future, really. And I think Jason and many like him, Martin too, lots of these people, the genuine ones, they're going to be part of that, and they're going to be looked up to in many ways. So they've got big responsibilities, but I know they'll, rise to them. And yeah, so that's it. A new summer of love, I guess, is once, and that maybe the new dawn will be there, and we'll all feel this weight off us, and then we're free.
I love that. What a beautiful vision, and so poetically articulated. Jason has
Thank you.
this wonderful word, that is making the rounds these days, errant. If you're familiar with
Mm.
that. So he uses the word errant. And it's sort of,
Oh yeah, yeah.
that we have the simulation, right? And it's like
Mm,
a
mm,
program of some kind. And
mm,
then you have people who are going contrary to the main programming, and they're like errors or errants in the
mm.
program. It also riffs off of the concept of a knight errant, someone who is on a quest, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Which is really,
definitely.
really cool. And lo and behold, there are all of these errant communities that are starting to sprout up all over the place. And there was an
Mm,
architects convention just at the beginning of April down in
mm.
Texas, and a bunch of people showed up from all over the place. So I think we're actually seeing signs
That's
of
great.
exactly this sort of thing. I know in my interview with Martin, he was talking about wanting to do a kind of British Invasion 2.0 where he shows up, flat Earth British. I keep tripping over that. Shows up, here in the United
Yeah.
States, and I
Oh
think
well,
really
yeah.
inspired by what Jason did. And even though they have
Mm,
differences in terms of their understanding of history, they found
oh
such
yeah, yeah.
common ground in their understanding of
Mm,
the simulation and of the Phoenix phenomenon and that sort of thing. They could
mm,
end up sharing the stage, or twin headlining a major event. And I think some of
mm,
these events moving forward, these summer of love types of events, will not just be
mm.
rave types of events with music and that sort of thing, but there will be a lot of information exchange going on in
Oh
these.
yeah. Mm.
Do you think that's
Oh
likely?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So that would be my vision, is that there is the sort of dancing of the freedom, people able to just let go and be free, but also, as you say, the information and people talking, and then I'm with Martin, the British invasion. Martin, I'm with you. I'll be there. Let's go. Yeah,
Great.
absolutely.
I have a
Yeah,
feeling you two
yeah,
would hit it off. I think if you would like, I can make an introduction. But obviously, you have your own world.
yeah.
You have your own your credentials going in. So I think he would think that you're a serious guy on this path. But he's fascinating.
Oh,
He
yeah, I'd love
I
to.
know that
Yeah,
you're a
yeah,
musician.
not, yeah.
He has a kind of inner rock star that's yet to be unleashed. And so a lot of us are like, we do all these really
Yeah.
healthy, good, positive things, but we also have that bad boy in us. I know that I do, and I know that Martin does, and I sense that
Oh,
you
he does.
may be
Yeah,
one of us in that way.
yeah. Yeah, we are basically, I suppose, we are kind of arch rebels, aren't we? We are the fringe dwellers, and we are the outlaws in a way. But we got good hearts, but yeah, we are, yeah, we are the bad boys. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, the bad boys are really the good boys, right? The bad guys are the good guys. That's what this movie is about. If you look at errants and
that's right.
trying to create a different reality.
We are, yes. So yeah, we have that kind of. It's almost like we have to have the bad boy, but really, we are the chivalry. The knights errant, as you say, with. So we uphold honor, loyalty, decency, and compassion. Yeah, but we could be, yeah, but the mainstream, doesn't necessarily like us too much. Yeah, yeah.
Well, listen, this has been a blast. I think that's a good place to transition and maybe set
Mm.
up for a round two one of these days. I feel like there's a lot of questions on related subjects that we could get into where we could easily go for another hour. So if you're into that, let's do that again one of these days.
Oh, I've really enjoyed it. And, it's just great to talk to you, and it'd be a pleasure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it'd be wonderful. Yeah. Or get Martin and me on at the same time or something crazy like that. Yeah.
That would actually be a lot of fun. Let me think about that. That's a really good idea. Thanks for sharing that.
Oh,
I
good.
want to I want to make sure that people know that once again that your website is Dr. Snake, and that's spelled DOK, so
Yeah.
drsnake.net. And also on
Yeah.
what is your Substack, the exact URL again?
Oh, yeah, it's a bit of a yeah. I'm trying to get the domain to resolve, but what it with so that's not yet working. But so at the moment it's basically what is it? Doctor Snake News or Substack dot I had to forget which one. Yeah, Doctor Snake News dot Substack dot com. Doctor Snake News dot Substack dot com. That's the
Good,
place
yeah.
where all the madness is. Yeah.
And I'm saulluckman.substack.com. Please come over to Substack. It's really hard for some reason to get people on YouTube to even pay any attention to Substack, but I'm telling you, Substack may be where it's all going to go down because a lot of the free-minded people, freedom lovers, that kind
Mm.
of thing are congregating on Substack and they're creating amazing content. Dr. Snake's website is very cool, so please check it out.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Sol, and all the best. Absolutely brilliant. I really enjoyed it.
Me too. It back at you, and until the next time, my friend.
Yep, supreme. I'll see you later.
See you later.